The topic is the definitive technological shift of the 21st century, the militarization of artificial intelligence.
Mm.
And we're moving far beyond, the simple chat functions and the predictive texts that seem to dominate all the headlines.
Right.
We're looking squarely at the strategic core, the advent of remotely controlled autonomous systems. You hear them called killer robots. And we need to talk about what they actually mean for global stability.
Right.
Our source material for this deep dive is, well, it's a heavy stack. It covers the foundational technical breakthrough of generative AI, and then this seismic explosion of private investment.
Unbelievable, the numbers.
Right, and the revolutionary, often classified product lines that are coming out of this new generation of defense tech companies. I mean, think Silicon Valley speed, but applied directly to the art of war.
And crucially, we're balancing that.
Yes, we have to. We're balancing all that innovation with some very sobering strategic analysis that details the existential risks that this rapid delegation of decision-making poses to human control.
So our mission today is really twofold. First, we need to, quickly establish the technical reality. We have to understand how machine learning has evolved from these very narrow specific tools into these generalized high-speed platforms.
From recognizing a specific thing to understanding a whole context.
Exactly. And second, and this is the most critical part, we have to assess the nature of the strategic leap that global powers are taking right now. This isn't just about faster drones. It's about the erosion of human decision latency in a conflict.
The time a human has to think.
That's gone, or it's shrinking. And that presents this unprecedented ethical and strategic challenge of, handing high-stakes execution over to an algorithm.
And that framework, it leads us right to the central tension that I think we're going to explore throughout this entire deep dive. You have the major global powers, the U.S., China, Russia, and they are all under this intense competitive pressure to harness the incredible speed, the incredible capability that AI offers on a modern battlefield.
They feel they have no choice.
Exactly.
Mm.
But how do they do this without completely ceding human control? Especially in those moments of high-stakes conflict where, as we'll discuss, algorithm brittleness could lead to catastrophic, unintended escalation in just a matter of seconds. So let's start with the fundamental technology, but rather than getting bogged down in what a neural network is, I think our audience is pretty familiar with the basics. Let's talk about the specific architecture that made large language models, LLMs, like the ones powering ChatGPT, such an absolute game changer.
Right.
Not just for, writing our emails, but for national security. Yeah. What was that architectural shift that unlocked this new level of generalized capability?
The key shift, the real breakthrough, was the transformer model, and specifically a mechanism within it called the attention mechanism.
Okay, attention. What does that mean in this context?
Well, previous AI systems, those narrow ones you mentioned, they were fantastic at a single task, like recognizing a tank or reading a map. But they were really confined to that training task. They completely lacked any kind of generalized reasoning.
Couldn't connect the dots.
Not at all. The transformer model, which was developed back in 2017, it allowed these systems to weigh the importance of different words or different pieces of information within a huge body of text or data. That's the attention part. It lets them understand context and relationships at a massive, massive scale.
Okay, so if a narrow AI was trained only to detect, say, a specific type of missile silo from satellite images, a transformer-based LLM is fundamentally different because it can ingest and interpret entire military doctrine manuals, logistics spreadsheets, operational reports all at once.
Precisely. That generalized capability is what allows the AI to function in what we'd call a broader scope. It operates inherently closer to the human domain because it can deal with complex language, with context, and with all those subtle relationships in the data.
It's still a statistical model, though, right? It's just predicting the next word.
At its core, yes, it's a statistical model leveraging deep learning principles. But its power comes from its ability to handle these massive, disparate data these huge collections of structured and unstructured information, and use them to predict sequences and generate coherent, contextually relevant output.
And this capability, it sort of manifests through two key stages, right? There's the training, and then there's the operational generation phase. Can you give us just a high-level look at those mechanics?
Of course. Think of it this way. The training phase is like the system reading the entire internet. Or in a military case, maybe the entire recorded history of conflict. It adjusts billions of internal parameters to build this incredibly complex generalized knowledge model. Then comes the really crucial fine-tuning process. This often uses human feedback or very specialized data to refine those predictions for a specific task.
Like a medical diagnosis, or in this case, tactical planning.
Exactly. So once it's trained and fine-tuned, the system can then apply all that acquired knowledge to generate new original output in response to a prompt. This is why we saw that incredible leap from, say, GPT-3 to GPT-4. The newer models simply possess broader knowledge, more advanced reasoning, and even multimodal capabilities.
Meaning they can handle more than just text.
Right. They can process text and image input and output all at the same time.
Now, before we get to the battlefield, we really have to acknowledge that this technology is transformative across basically every civilian sector. You mentioned specialized uses like medical diagnosis and legal work. Just how pervasive is this generative AI becoming?
Oh, the applications are stunningly broad. We are well past simple content creation and, customer service chatbots. In medicine, for example, LLMs are being used not just to synthesize patient records, but to actually accelerate scientific research. They can rapidly analyze millions of existing academic papers to suggest novel drug targets or synthesize diagnostic probabilities for incredibly rare diseases.
So what took a team of researchers months of review?
Now takes mere minutes. And in the legal sector, specialized AI systems are passing bar exams. They're dramatically cutting down on discovery costs by automating the review of millions of documents. Essentially, what LLMs provide are these robust, accessible language processing tools that automate routine information management and analysis tasks far more efficiently than humans ever could.
It really does sound like a utopia of efficiency.
In many ways, it is. It fundamentally changes the cognitive load of high-level professional work.
But, and this is the big turn, when we transition from a medical context where a mistake might delay a diagnosis to high-stakes military use,
Yeah.
where a mistake means immediate kinetic consequences.
The whole game changes.
Right. The inherent limitations of this technology become not just a nuisance, but an existential threat. So what are those key technical limitations that must be keeping military planners up at night?
Well, the sources are very clear that the very qualities that make LLMs so powerful, their ability for generalized reasoning, also introduce some really serious vulnerabilities, especially in the chaotic military domain.
Okay, like what?
The first major concern is something called hallucinations.
I've heard this term. It's when the AI just makes things up.
It's exactly that. The AI generates plausible-sounding outputs that are entirely fabricated, factually incorrect, or just completely detached from reality, because the system is optimized for coherence and statistical probability.
Not for truth.
Precisely. Not for truth. These fabricated outputs can be dangerously overconfident and, crucially, not at all obvious to a human reviewer.
So if the model has been trained on conflicting or just inadequate data, it doesn't say, I don't know.
It generates a confident lie.
And if an autonomous defense system is relying on fused sensor data that's been processed by an LLM, and that LLM fabricates a threat location or misidentifies a critical asset, the consequences are, well, they're instantaneous.
Absolutely. You could launch a counterstrike against a ghost target, wasting incredibly valuable resources. Or, much worse, you could commit fratricide because the system misclassified an ally as an enemy threat, all because of one hallucinated data point.
That's terrifying. What's the next limitation?
The second is systemic bias. LLMs are only as good as the data they're trained on. And if that data reflects historical biases, geographical, cultural, or even inherent military biases from decades of recorded conflict, the model's output will absolutely reflect and potentially even amplify those flaws.
And this feeds right back into the accountability problem, right? The notorious black box nature of deep learning.
Exactly. We struggle to fully understand the inner workings of systems that have billions of parameters. When errors or biased outputs happen, pinpointing the cause and assigning any kind of accountability is nearly impossible. And that lack of transparency, it just completely undermines the trust you need for high-stakes delegation.
And finally, the third, and to me, maybe the most concerning limitation in a combat environment, is brittleness.
Brittleness is the Achilles heel of these systems. AI can be very deceptive. They often perform flawlessly in a lab setting or within the very narrow context they were trained for.
But the real world isn't a lab.
Not even close. And the moment these systems encounter data or environmental conditions that are outside their expected parameters, a change in lighting, new camouflage patterns, electronic jamming, or just unexpected weather, they fail. And they failed dramatically, often in ways that a human never would.
You're talking about the kind of inexplicable failure that leads to a self-driving car suddenly turning deadly when any human driver would have navigated the situation easily.
That's the perfect analogy. And the military environment is the definition of chaotic, dynamic, and actively deceptive.
The enemy's trying to fool you.
They are. Military forces actively try to confuse and spoof the enemy. So brittleness means that an AI system trained only on clear weather, daylight images, might become completely blind during a sandstorm, or after an unexpected cyber attack, alters its sensor input. This isn't just a minor failure, it's a total failure that happens exactly when the system is needed most, under maximum stress.
So, okay, we have this powerful, fast, but fundamentally brittle and occasionally mendacious technology.
Yeah.
Yet the world's militaries are rushing to adopt it. So why is the risk worth it? The answer, as you laid out, seems to be scale. Connecting LLMs and AI to the battlefield scale, it's all about dealing with information overload.
That is the core incentive. The non-negotiable value of AI in modern warfare is managing the sheer scale problem.
The scale problem.
Yes.
Right?
Current military conflict, driven by this proliferation of technology, generates an overwhelming, truly paralyzing amount of information every single second. I mean, think of the thousands of sensors deployed, satellites, reconnaissance drones, ground sentry towers, acoustic sensors, all feeding these massive streams of data simultaneously.
The human capacity to process that, to synthesize it, and act on it.
It's the ultimate bottleneck.
So this means that even if you have the best sensor suite in the world, if you can't actually digest the data stream, you might as well be fighting blind.
Absolutely. The military's primary warfighting function is locating and tracking the adversary, who, remember, is actively trying to hide, to jam your sensors, and to deceive you. AI, through platforms like Anduril's Lattice operating system, is tasked with sifting through petabytes of noise to find that one critical signal.
And what does that look like in practice?
It involves classifying objects, distinguishing between, say, civilian traffic and a military convoy. It's about determining if a rapid maneuver by an enemy unit is a hostile, aggressive action, or if it's merely an administrative movement that just falls outside of historical norms. The machine does that initial sort.
Let's elaborate on how this augmentation changes the human role then. It sounds like the human operator moves up the hierarchy of decision-making.
That is the promise. If it's implemented successfully, AI augmentation elevates the human operator. The systems process the data flood, allowing the human to move away from those mechanical processing tasks, like manually reviewing 10,000 hours of drone footage.
Which is impossible.
It's impossible. And instead, they can focus entirely on context, on historical understanding, on doctrine, and on the strategic and ethical implications of the different choices presented to them. The machine provides the speed and the capacity for mass. The human provides the wisdom, the accountability, and the common sense that the algorithm completely lacks. The entire objective is to enable humans to operate at a much, much larger scale with exponentially higher precision.
And that shifting capability is being enabled by a really structural shift in the defense industry itself. For decades, the pace was dictated by these massive legacy contractors operating under a specific, slow, and very expensive model.
The cost-plus model.
Right. And now, it seems like Silicon Valley is setting the tempo.
We are absolutely witnessing the rise of the Silicon Valley defense contractor. The legacy system, that cost-plus contracting structure, was inherently slow, and it actually incentivized budget overruns. The F-35, for example, took 25 years to field, costing trillions.
An entire generation.
Right. New companies, epitomized by Anduril Industries, which was founded in 2017 by key figures from the consumer tech world, they operate on venture capital speed. Their goal is agility and rapid iteration.
And their business model is a direct challenge to that establishment. They are not waiting for the government to issue a request for proposal with decades of rigid specifications.
Yeah.
They're building the product first.
Exactly. They are building to the mission, not to the spec. They use their own significant venture capital from huge firms like Founders Fund and Andreessen Horowitz to develop finished, innovative products, demonstrate that they have operational capability, and then they sell the finished solution to the government.
So that rapid development model allows them to iterate faster.
Much faster. They can implement the latest commercial technologies immediately and potentially offer solutions that are both faster to field and more cost-effective than their traditional counterparts.
And the financial world is betting heavily on this transition. The sheer financial scope of this shift seems to demonstrate that the government and private investors really view AI warfare as the next major strategic and economic domain.
The investment figures are staggering, and they really show the urgency. Pentagon AI spending saw a 1,200% increase between 2022 and 2023.
Wait, say that again? 1,200%.
1,200%. This is not pocket change. This is a radical reallocation of the budget. And furthermore, you have major commercial tech players, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, all securing significant military contracts, often valued in the hundreds of millions each.
And Endural, which is kind of the face of this movement, is being valued like a major tech unicorn.
Oh, absolutely. Their valuation trajectory is illustrative of the market's belief in this model. After they secured $1.5 billion in Series F funding in 2024, the company was valued at $14 billion.
And they didn't stop there.
Not at all. They followed this up with another $2.5 billion raise in 2025, which pushed their post-money valuation to over $30 billion. That level of capital, we're talking over $4 billion in total VC funding. It gives them the resources to achieve hyperscale production and rapid iteration that traditional defense companies simply cannot match without years and years of budget appropriations.
It's private capital dictating the speed of defense innovation.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So let's focus on the technology that ties all their hardware together. Lattice OS. We've described it as the operating system for war. What does Lattice specifically enable on the battlefield?
Lattice is the centralized brain. Its whole purpose is to fuse data from absolutely every source you can imagine, Anduril's own systems, legacy military systems, third-party sensors, and create a single unified real-time picture of the battlefield. It uses AI to perform really sophisticated object classification and track movement.
But it's more than just a map, right?
Critically, yes. Lattice moves beyond just situational awareness. It is a command and control platform. It allows a single human operator, potentially using nothing more than a customized laptop interface, to manage separate, complex teams of autonomous assets.
Like what kind of assets?
Drones, ground vehicles, counter-UAS systems all at the same time. This dramatically simplifies multi-domain coordination, and it massively reduces the cognitive load on the human commander. It essentially automates that tedious, slow coordination loop.
And this speed and control, this brings us directly to the integration of LLM technology into lethal systems. It's no longer just about processing data. It's enabling AI to execute complex tactical maneuvers.
This is the critical leap. And we have concrete, demonstrated examples of this. Anduril successfully ran simulations where LLM-controlled fighter drones were commanded by voice.
Just by talking to them.
Just by talking to them. The AI processed complex, natural language tactical instructions. Things like intercept the hostile formation at the boundary, but avoid the collateral damage zone. And it translated that intent into autonomous flight paths, coordination between drones and combat operations, and they destroyed the simulated enemy aircraft.
So this is not pre-programmed flight paths?
Not at all. This is true generalized tactical execution based on language understanding.
And this capability is being industrialized, right?
Yeah.
Through programs like the U.S. Air Force's Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, or CCA.
The CCA program is, without a doubt, the future of air power. Anduril's YFQ-44A prototype, which recently completed its first flight test, is a key component of that vision. These are advanced, stealthy aircraft explicitly designed to augment crewed fighter jets.
So they fly alongside an F-35.
Exactly. They conduct reconnaissance, surveillance, and, crucially, combat maneuvers without a human pilot on board. They're networked, they're theoretically expendable, and they're designed to operate at the edge of the fight, acting as scouts or missile carriers or even decoys.
Let's catalog some of these specific autonomous systems that are now being fielded, because the sheer diversity of roles demonstrates that this is a comprehensive strategic shift, not just some niche program. Let's start with the counter-UAS space.
Okay. The best example there is a system called Anvil. It's an unmanned combat quadcopter, also known as the Interceptor, and its entire purpose is counter-UAS, drone-on-drone warfare.
How does it work?
It uses advanced computer vision to locate a target drone, and its small size allows it to reach speeds up to 200 miles per hour. A human operator designates the threat via the Lattice system, and then Anvil uses its own autonomy to execute the intercept.
And it just rams it.
It often rams the target drone kinetically, yes.
Yeah.
It is a dedicated, rapid response AI-controlled drone killer.
Okay, next we see systems that radically blur the line between a reusable drone and a precision missile. You mentioned the Roadrunner family.
Roadrunner is highly innovative. It's a 6-foot-long, twin turbojet-powered vehicle that fits inside a shipping container, and it operates somewhere between a high-performance drone and a missile. The basic model handles intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
But there's a lethal version.
Yes. The Roadrunner M variant is fitted with an explosive warhead. It is designed specifically to intercept incoming high-value threats like cruise missiles and even manned aircraft.
And what makes Roadrunner truly revolutionary is its reusability, isn't that right?
Yes, and this is transformative economically. It uses vertical takeoff and landing capability right from its container. If it successfully intercepts a target, mission accomplished. But if it launches, flies a mission, and doesn't need to detonate its warhead,
It can come back and land.
it can be recovered and reused. This offers a flexibility and a cost efficiency that was previously unheard of in missile defense technology. You don't expend $1 million interceptor for a false alarm anymore.
Then, addressing that scale problem directly, we have the Barracuda family. This seems to be the answer to the need for hyperscale production.
The Barracuda family represents the complete divorce from legacy defense contracting scale. It consists of these air-breathing autonomous air vehicles, and they are designed from the ground up for hyperscale mass production.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Their target production rate is in the thousands per year, and they're aiming for 30% lower cost and 50% less time to produce than comparable legacy missiles. They do this by leveraging commercial supply chains and advanced manufacturing techniques.
And the munition variant, the Barracuda M.
The Barracuda M acts as an affordable, upgradable cruise missile alternative. It's capable of maneuvering up to 5 Gs. Their function isn't just single strikes. They are built to be mass-produced, to be deployed as distributed fires, or even employed as large swarming assets to just overwhelm an adversary's defenses. This fundamentally changes the economics of attrition warfare.
And these systems are moving from development to deployment with a real sense of urgency. And the conflict in Ukraine is often cited as the primary catalyst. What specific lessons from that conflict are driving this rapid technological adoption?
Ukraine has become the operational proving ground. The key lesson, the one that everyone has learned, is the proliferation of cheap, easily accessible drones. Because of this, every unit and every soldier is now potentially at risk all the time from the air.
So the timeline for a successful counter-drone response detect, identify, coordinate, shoot is incredibly short.
It's measured in minutes or sometimes even seconds.
And the human coordination loop is just too slow for that velocity of threat.
Exactly. The manual human coordination loop, the radar operator seeing the blip, communicating to the camera operator, who then confirms the threat, who then communicates to the command post, which then authorizes the trigger puller, it's too complex and way too slow.
So AI becomes essential.
It becomes an essential defensive measure. It fuses sensor data from multiple sources, it identifies the threat with high confidence, it suggests the best course response, and it often executes the engagement loop entirely autonomously, right up to the point of firing.
And this efficiency also extends to strategic targeting, I imagine.
It does. The process of finding, vetting, and striking high-value targets has been streamlined dramatically. Historically, it might take hours or even days to take satellite imagery, analyze it, get human confirmation that, yes, this looks like a tank, and then get command approval that it's a legitimate military target.
And now?
AI platforms are compressing that timeline significantly, often to sub-minute decision loops. This allows for a much higher operational tempo and, theoretically, greater precision.
So we've established the technical capability, the capital behind it, and the battlefield urgency. Now, we have to address the colossal strategic risk that this speed introduces, which analysts have chillingly termed hyperwar.
Hyperwar, or what some Chinese scholars call the battlefield singularity. It's the competitive pressure to accelerate the tempo of warfare beyond the pace of human cognitive ability or even human control.
It's an arms race in speed.
It's absolutely an arms race in speed. Once one major power delegates key operational decisions to machines to gain some fleeting tactical advantage, say reducing their reaction time from 5 minutes to 50 seconds, the adversary is immediately compelled to follow suit. They have to avoid being catastrophically outpaced.
So both sides start handing over more and more authority to their algorithms.
Yes, effectively shortening the decision cycle to milliseconds. And at that point, the conflict is being fought by machines, not by humans.
The moment the machines are making decisions faster than humans can even process the raw data, we risk losing the ability to manage the conflict itself. What are the specific consequences of this kind of delegation and this loss of control?
The consequences are immense, and they are potentially catastrophic. If military operations are entirely managed by machines, political leaders and policymakers completely lose control over managing escalation and maybe more importantly, managing war termination.
How to end the fight.
Exactly. War is chaotic. There will always be tactical missteps, fratricide, unintended civilian casualties, poorly judged maneuvers. In a human-controlled environment, these can usually be contained. But in a hyperwar scenario, these tactical errors could spiral uncontrollably, reaching strategic and even catastrophic proportions before a human has the time to recognize the error and intervene. The machine's efficiency becomes a strategic vulnerability.
And this issue isn't just restricted to malfunctioning systems, is it? The sources point out that even robust, properly functioning AI systems pose this challenge simply because of that inherent brittleness of algorithms in contested areas.
This is the dilemma of common sense versus programming, and it's so critical. Autonomous systems today fundamentally lack contextual understanding, intuition, or the flexible judgment that human commanders possess. A human general can interpret broad, nuanced guidance like, defend our territorial claims aggressively, but avoid any action that could be perceived as an invasion, and they can apply that judgment in milliseconds. An advanced AI system simply follows its pre-specified programming rigidly.
So if you deploy these autonomous systems in a tense crisis, say during a naval standoff in the East China Sea, you're effectively forcing your own human decision-makers to tie their own hands.
You are. The system has to operate with predictable, pre-specified actions because it lacks that capacity for nuanced judgment. And this predictability can be strategically exploited by an adversary, or worse, tragically misunderstood.
Which leads directly to the highest risk, escalation via misinterpretation. The ambiguity of autonomous action could be deadly.
Absolutely. The complexity of these systems means that even the commanders employing them might not fully understand or be able to predict the precise action the system will take in a novel situation. So now imagine an adversary observing this.
They have no idea what's going on inside the black box.
None. So if an autonomous system fires on their forces in a highly contested area, how does their leadership interpret that? Was that action an intentional, high-level signal from the nation's political command? Or was it a programming error, a sensor hallucination, or just a technical glitch?
And if the enemy doesn't know if that autonomous action reflects a human's intended strategy, they almost have to assume the worst.
They have to. The uncertainty about whether the action aligns with any human's intended plan greatly heightens the risk of accidental escalation. In a crisis where every minute matters, that ambiguity removes the critical capacity for dialogue and de-escalation. It essentially creates a crisis manager that responds too fast for human dialogue to keep up.
If the stakes of losing control are high across the board, they become uniquely existential when we start to talk about nuclear stability. The idea of delegating control, even partially, to an algorithm in the nuclear domain is, well, it's terrifying.
The intersection of AI and nuclear operations is the highest stakes application possible. We're already seeing AI integrated into early warning and forecasting systems tools that analyze vast amounts of data for any indications of a potential aggressive launch. But these tools still suffer from all the known limitations we talked about: brittleness, lack of transparency, and the human tendency toward automation bias.
We trust the machine, even when we shouldn't.
We do, and historically, even non-AI early warning systems have suffered from false alarms. The famous 1983 Soviet false alarm, for example, was caused by sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds being misinterpreted as a missile launch.
And only one man's gut instinct prevented a retaliatory strike.
Exactly. Now, introduce AI, with its potential for confident hallucinations and its inherent brittleness, into a system where decision latency is already measured in just minutes, and you've added an unprecedented layer of risk.
So to counter this profound existential risk, strategic analysts have proposed specific confidence-building measures, or CBMs, tailored for the nuclear domain. What are these proposals designed to prevent?
The goal, really, is to ensure positive, redundant human control at all times. The first proposal is an agreement on strict human control over nuclear launch decisions.
So a human always has to be in the loop for the final call.
It's essentially an international commitment among nuclear powers to ensure positive, high-level human oversight over all launch decisions. And it would explicitly preclude automated dead-hand systems or any kind of automatic algorithmic trigger for nuclear use.
But doesn't this run directly into the historical dilemma of deterrence?
It does, and it's a thorny problem. If a nation relies on automated retaliatory systems to guarantee a second strike capability, in the event of a decapitation strike that kills the top political leadership, then agreeing to remove that automated option could paradoxically destabilize things.
How so?
If you remove the machine's safeguard, leaders might feel a greater incentive to strike first under ambiguous warning because they fear their command structure will be wiped out before they can respond. It's a complex, painful trade-off between minimizing accident risk and maximizing first strike stability.
What about the second proposed measure? That one focuses on the platforms themselves.
That's the prohibition on uninhabited nuclear launch platforms. This would ban recoverable, remotely piloted, or fully autonomous platforms, submarines, bombers, fighter jets, from being armed with nuclear weapons.
So no nuclear-armed robot submarines.
Exactly. Currently, nearly all recoverable nuclear launch platforms require human crews, which provides an immediate, direct layer of onboard human physical control and oversight. Deploying nuclear weapons on uninhabited platforms just dramatically increases the risk that a mechanical flaw, faulty software, or a successful cyber attack could lead to a machine-initiated nuclear launch.
Yeah, the argument is that we should ban this now, before it's widely deployed.
Yes, since this capability is not yet widely deployed, it's viewed by some as an agreement that might be easier to reach now before the systems are built and fielded, serving as a critical preventative measure.
Okay, so we face this competitive pressure that demands speed. Yet we know that speed introduces catastrophic systemic risk. Stopping innovation seems impossible. Therefore, we have to establish rigorous rules of the road.
The good news is that the strategic community does recognize this tension. Governments, including the U.S. Department of Defense and NATO, have formalized some initial ethical frameworks.
Right, I've seen these.
The U.S. DoD, for instance, established AI principles requiring systems to be responsible, equitable, traceable, reliable, and governable. NATO focuses on similar norms like lawfulness and accountability. These are really the first steps toward formalizing norms for what is acceptable military AI use.
But when you look at the pace of deployment, especially from this new defense vanguard, is there a fundamental tension between these stated ethical principles and the relentless drive for technological advantage?
There is a massive tension. The underlying belief driving this whole movement is that it is fundamentally unethical not to apply the best technology to save lives and solve critical national security problems. The argument is that well-designed AI will enable humans to operate with higher precision and, potentially lower risk to human troops.
That's the ideal scenario.
That's the ideal. However, when we look at implementation, militaries generally prioritize maintaining a technological edge over an adversary. When you're balancing the risk of a minor accident caused by your own AI versus the risk of falling fatally behind an adversary and capabilities,
Accident risk takes a backseat.
it often becomes a secondary consideration. The challenge is ensuring that these stated ethical principles are backed by rigorous testing, by regulation, and by international transparency to prevent them from becoming mere window dressing for systems that are deployed regardless.
When facing existential risk, nations have historically turned to these confidence-building measures, CBMs, to mitigate the risk of accidental war. Can we truly apply these historical tools from the Cold War to the incredibly fast, opaque world of autonomous algorithms?
I think we have to look at the Cold War precedents for inspiration. After the Cuban Missile Crisis, the 1963 hotline was established.
A red phone.
The Red Phone. Its purpose was simple: to ensure that war would only happen by deliberate political decision, not by accident or technical error or miscommunication. Later, the 1972 Incidents at Sea Agreement regulated dangerous maneuvers and improved communication between U.S. and Soviet naval vessels, preventing accidental skirmishes that could have spiraled out of control.
And those CBMs worked.
They worked because both sides shared a core interest: avoiding nuclear Armageddon.
So how do we translate that idea of regulating naval maneuvers to regulating code and algorithms?
Well, analysts have proposed 3 concrete CBMs tailored for the AI age. First, International Test and Evaluation Standards. This means establishing specific international standards for the test and evaluation, the T&E of military AI applications before they are deployed in contested regions.
What's the goal there?
The goal is to raise the bar against accident risk and to prevent premature deployment that's driven by purely competitive pressure. Now, while such standards might not be immediately enforceable worldwide, they could serve as a focal point for like-minded states to promote genuinely responsible norms, making it politically harder for others to deploy systems that are known to be brittle or inadequately tested.
Okay. The second CBM deals with signaling intent through the machines themselves, marking autonomous systems.
This involves developing standardized physical or electronic markings to signal to adversaries the degree of autonomy a system possesses. For example, a clear electronic signal or a distinct physical marking might communicate that a certain platform is known to operate in a fully autonomous mode under specific conditions.
But this immediately raises a cynical question, doesn't it? Wouldn't an adversary immediately try to spoof or replicate that marking to confuse our own forces, which would render the CBM useless?
That is a valid and very high-stakes concern. Any signal can be spoofed. However, the value of the marking isn't necessarily in guaranteeing absolute security, it's in creating a shared vocabulary for crisis communication.
So it's about context.
It is. If an adversarial nation sees a marked drone performing a dangerous maneuver, and they know what that marking means according to international dialogue, it provides a starting point for them to assess intent. Transparency, even imperfect transparency, is still better than pure ambiguity when you're facing escalation risk. It allows one side to credibly claim, our system is programmed to operate like X, which gives the other side an opportunity to question and verify rather than just firing immediately.
And finally, communication channels are essential when these systems inevitably interact in highly contested areas.
Yes, that is the necessity of military-to-military dialogues. Establishing direct, private channels between major military forces, the US, China, Russia, specifically to discuss the behavior and operational boundaries of deployed autonomous vehicles in regions like the South China Sea or Syria.
Another hotline, but for robots.
Essentially, if an autonomous vessel behaves erratically or aggressively, this channel would allow the adversary to immediately query the deploying state about its behavior. It reduces the chance that an accidental action is misinterpreted as an intentional, high-level signal of aggression. History shows that even among deep rivals, such dialogues are crucial to preventing miscalculation.
This entire discussion, it's been driven by the speed of innovation from companies like Anduril. But that speed highlights a dangerous systemic issue. The U.S. defense procurement system itself is arguably a strategic liability.
It is arguably the single biggest threat to long-term military superiority, not just in AI, but across all domains. The sources are very clear that the U.S. procurement system is structurally broken. It creates perverse incentives, that cost-plus model we mentioned, that reward slow, expensive, and often unreliable outcomes. We mentioned the F-35 taking 25 years to field, while a commercial airliner takes 2 or 3.
There was that astonishing quote you mentioned about the cost curve. Tell us about the structural pathology it reveals.
The quote suggested that if you extrapolated the current trend of...
And this structural sluggishness is compounding the threat from adversaries who are moving much, much faster, especially in critical areas like hypersonic development.
The competitive pace is the real long-term worry. China, for instance, is running hundreds of tests per year on advanced capabilities like hypersonic weapons, while the U.S. is running perhaps 4 or 5. The compounding value of rapid iteration and learning is just lost when the development cycle is tied to a 10-year bureaucracy.
And the money for new tech is still a tiny fraction of the budget.
It's shockingly low. The money dedicated to truly new, disruptive technology remains less than 0.2% of the defense budget. This means the U.S. is struggling to build capacity en masse.
So the solution isn't just about throwing more money at the problem. It requires a radical structural overhaul of how the military acquires technology.
Exactly. There are 2 key strategies for structural change. First, a serious redirection of resources, making tough choices to increase the percentage of the defense budget dedicated to innovative, disruptive technology, even if it means cutting legacy programs. And second, and perhaps more fundamentally, empowering program offices.
Getting rid of the red tape.
You have to. You need to stop having 10 layers of bureaucracy whose primary job is to check boxes and say no, and instead empower capable leaders to run hard at a problem, give them resources, hold them accountable, and, crucially, allow them to make informed trade-offs between risk, cost, and schedule.
Which is what Anduril's doing on the outside.
Companies like Anduril are succeeding precisely because they bypass the structural void. They use commercial supply chains and venture capital speed to achieve mass production and rapid iteration where the legacy system failed. The ability to field thousands of low-cost, upgradable missiles or drones is a much more effective long-term deterrent than fielding 1 or 2 exquisitely expensive, complex platforms decades too late.
This has been a profound deep dive into the convergence of consumer AI technology, private finance, and existential military strategy. It's so clear the automated battlefield is arriving now, not in some distant sci-fi future.
We've definitely established that the shift toward AI-augmented and autonomous warfare is in full swing. It's being driven by the technical power of commercial LLM technology, this massive VC funding into agile defense companies like Anduril, and the tactical urgency underscored by conflicts like Ukraine, where automation is now essential simply for self-defense.
The opportunities are immense. The potential for higher precision, fewer risks to human troops, maintaining strategic deterrence. But the peril is equally profound. The threat of accelerating conflict beyond human control hyperwar due to algorithm brittleness and competitive delegation is an unprecedented challenge.
And it requires international coordination at a speed that is currently unmatched by global diplomacy.
So, considering the lightning speed of AI advancement and the lack of comprehensive international agreements that truly govern the battlefield, we leave you with this final provocative thought. The central question for the next decade isn't if autonomous systems will fight, but rather, are the safeguards being designed quickly enough to ensure that the machine's programming aligns with human intent in the chaos of a global crisis, or are the algorithms already taking us down an escalatory path we will be unable to choose to exit?